Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak with everyone today. I was pretty excited to have the opportunity to talk because what we're about to do today with this bug bash is something that I've spent the last 5 or 6 years actually doing. I've been traveling around the world doing very similar events. So I always love when instead of just sitting in the most boring lecture of someone telling you what they think you should be doing, you actually get an opportunity to do something hands-on. So bug bashes and things like this are always incredibly fun. And today I plan to give you my all. In this 15 or 20 minutes that we have, I plan to go so far in that people are I don't need to get lost by how far in I go. So in order to make sure that you're cool, you're gonna need things like pens or your notepad ready to take notes with some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And really the second thing that I would love from you is an implementation mindset. And really, as we go through this chat, I want you to be thinking, if you get an aha moment, write that down. If you're thinking, how might this apply for me today? And I've got a question for Ron, I am here to answer them, right? So use this opportunity as much as you can to help us move forward. If that is okay with you, can you just give me a yes? Or in actual fact, use something that is yes without saying the word yes. Give me a hell yeah, give me a let's go, give me a something inside that chat so I know we got some. Julia's like, of course, let's do this. Boom, loving it. All right, let's go. So how did today even come about? How am I even here talking to you? So I am the co-founder of a company called Global App Testing. For the past 7 or 8 years, we have been helping companies around the world deal with their testing. And essentially, we do this with a large number of testers. We have 50,000 testers around the world and an incredible internal team that we work with. And we get to work with some of the coolest companies in the world. If you pick up your phone right now, you look through the first 2 screens, we probably test for those exact companies across the world. And so what that ended up giving us was an insight into how these companies work internally. And what I want to do today is share some of those things that we've learned working with these teams that hopefully is going to be useful for you. And about 2 years ago, we ended up releasing a book called Leading Quality. And to my mother's complete joy, it became an Amazon bestseller. And the time when that became a bestseller, you can imagine we celebrated like crazy in our office to the point where all we did was eat cake, book cake like crazy. And the thing that I guess I enjoyed, I guess more than the cake, was what people ended up saying about what we had written. So from Twitter to Slack to the New York Times, all of the VPs of engineering and leaders inside those companies were just talking about how great. Can't see the slides if you're sharing. Oh dear, we can't see the slides. Thank you. You see, let me just...
You having trouble sharing your screen?
Let me check. Okay, we probably should be seeing some slides now. I've got nods and other bits and bobs coming. So for those that the most interesting slide in all of this was literally just the cake slide, all of the magic big cakes that we ended up having. And so the feedback that we got from people was great. But I guess personally for me, the thing that was the most special out of everything was when the people that we look up to, and this here is Lisa Crispin, who wrote the book Agile Testing, were excited to meet us. We were like, what do you mean we're excited to meet you? And so the legends around us have managed to think that what I'm about to explain to you today was super useful and super cool. And so the challenge that we have today is really working out what from all of that 2 years or 200 plus hours of research is going to be useful for you today. And from thinking it through, I think there are 2 ideas that I want to share with you today. Number 1 is, how do you become a better tester and basically win this competition that we're in here today? Because, we're all pretty competitive. That's pretty much why most of you ended up joining this, because the non-competitive would have thought this would be a horrible idea. So what are some of the things that I can share that might help you to be able to actually win? And I think in order to answer that, we're going to have to look at the question of what is quality in and of itself. So let's start from the very beginning. And really, when most people talk about quality to me and I have these conversations, oftentimes they're talking about it in terms of product quality or engineering team's quality. And I look at those both as very internal views of quality inside their company. And when you think about the narrative of quality, everyone has different definitions, but there's two things that everyone seems to agree on. The first one is that quality in and of itself is subjective. It's determined by whoever is using the product at that exact time. And then secondly, it is relative. And that's that it changes over time. I don't know how many people on this call remember those good old-fashioned days of dial-up when you had to. Firstly, I don't understand how this technology was so loud. It was the loudest thing ever to turn on. But when you turned it on, you would click on a page. You would leave the computer. Imagine this. You would go and start boiling a cup of tea. You would brew the tea, pour the tea, come back to your computer, and you would hope that that page had loaded. That's how slow things were for us all back in the day. But now, can you imagine that happening? Like if a page doesn't load in like 1 second, we are screaming at our machines thinking, what the hell's going on? And for the Windows people in the room, who remembers the Microsoft blue screen of death? The number of times that blue screen of death came in my life, I swear I could have whacked through my screen in frustration because that was before everything was saved. And you know, you did your homework and then it didn't save and you couldn't really tell that excuse to your teacher. So those are the issues that we had back in the past. But nowadays, if an app keeps on failing, we're not going to keep on using it. We'll just switch to a different, competitor's application. And so our experience of quality is relative and it changes. And my favorite definition comes from Michael Bolton, and it's an adaptation that says, quality is valued to some person at some time who matters. And I really like this because it has such a focus on the person who matters, which in most of our cases is our customer. And so when I think about people who have a great focus on customer, this guy comes into my mind. It is good old, Jeff Bezos, who sadly has just resigned from Amazon. But while he was at Amazon, he was super customer focused. And in his letters to shareholders back in 2018, he had said to them that customers are always divinely discontent, which basically means whatever they have now, they're not going to be happy in the future. And there is always this opportunity for growth. And I think that's quite a great thing for us as people who are building companies and we're testing in those spaces, because there's always going to be a gap, always going to be something that doesn't feel right relative to where the customer is right now. But if you just take that view of quality, that customers are always divinely discontent and having that customer focus, that's actually an external view of quality, because you're looking at things outside of your business, because you're coming from more of that customer's viewpoint. And, sometimes when I talk to people about this, it can't fully be understood until I say that history is repeating itself. And to understand that, we're going to have to go back in time. And we're going to go back to World War II. So back in World War II, in the UK, they were making bombs in the factories, but they had a little bit of a problem. The problem that they had was that bombs were going off during the manufacturing process. Now, it does not take a genius to know that is a terrible thing to be happening if you own a bomb factory, because basically there's lives and there's a cascading issue that happens with the bombs. So the UK decided that they were going to create an inspection program for that whole manufacturing process. And a lot of this is the roots of what is now known as ISO. And ISO ends up being a set of rules that kind of companies have to go through. And there's loads of different types of certification they can go through to prove that they are more secure in the way that they work. But the other thing that happened during wartime was that at the end of it, Japan had a bit of a problem. Their economy had been flawed, and they had to work out how were they going to rebuild their economy. And they decided to focus on manufacturing. And as many of us now know, the Japanese became super famous for how great they were at doing that manufacturing, particularly in cars. And when you look at it, they use principles like lean manufacturing, which was continually getting the product through that factory. Or they looked at principles like Kaizen, which was continuous improvement. And when you think about these, it's very much looking at how do I take the flow of work through the production line of my factory and what is the quality of my product is the core focus. And those 2 points are an internal view of quality. And it wasn't until this man came on the scene that things began to change. Now, not many people know who this guy is. This guy is a gentleman called Joseph Juran. And they don't know who he is, but a lot of people know who this guy is, which is Steve Jobs. Now, Joseph Juran was Steve's mentor. And one of the reasons that Steve became so fanatical about the quality of their product and having a great quality product for their customer was because Juran had educated him around this. And a lot of these principles that he said to him, it was like, don't just look at the lean principles. We have to make sure that we're taking the quality in it and its perspective to the customer into play as we're building out these products, as we're manufacturing stuff. And that, as we can see, is an external view of quality. Now, how do we develop software today? If we look at the principles of how we develop software, it's around things like agile development, lean principles, DevOps. All of these principles have come from manufacturing. And really, the way that we develop software was a lift and play of taking the lessons of how we developed hardware and putting it into play. And so instead of looking at the flow of work through a production line, we now look at the flow of work for a development pipeline, and we look at the quality of the product. But as we move forward, we have to start having more of this internal view of quality, right? And so the internal view of quality comes back to quality is valued to some person at some time who matters. And once you have that view of quality that is, again, looking at the customer, just as what happened in the manufacturing era, history plays itself out where this external view that's customer focused becomes important. And we're beginning to see this with a lot of the customers that we speak with and a lot of the big companies that we speak with, that they're beginning to say, I need to focus on the customer in all of my engineering and all of my quality efforts. And this means that there's now this external view of quality. And so many of you are listening today saying, Ronald, you told me you were going to help us win this competition. Why are you nattering on about this internal view of customers versus the external view of customers and focusing on what's going on in quality? Now, the reason is because this is one of the most foundational ways of being better in terms of our ability to test our products, is to have an external and a more customer view of quality. And so how might you apply this in the work that you do on a day-to-day? So firstly, I want you to think about personas. And usually when inside our companies, and for this particular app that we're going to be working on today, there's different types of users who use that application. And usually there are two ways to look at this. The first way to look at the personas is from the product and marketing perspective. And these are big generalizations about the type of person that might use it. And so as you're sitting there thinking about the persons or the type of personas that might use it, think about their day. Think about what environments might they be in or what might be happening around them as they're trying to use this product. And the more that you think about that flow of their journey, the more ideas that start to come to your head. Oftentimes when I'm telling people about this idea of thinking about the journey of a persona, I talk about my own journey from my house and to work. And if you look at it, I wake up in the morning and my phone is usually on silent mode because I don't want to be disturbed. And then it comes on and I'm on my home Wi-Fi. I then leave my house and I go on to 4G or 5G. So that connectivity shift now means the application might work differently for me. I then get on the tube where I have no signal. And sometimes I might want to use an application, but there's no signal, and the way that data works and the type of errors that get thrown up start to change and adjust. And then I come to the office and I'm on like more of an enterprise Wi-Fi system. And just that thinking about what my day looked like, there's lots of different shifts and changes that might give you inspiration for what might you think about trialing as you're looking at how you might break or adjust the app that you're looking at. So that's more of the persona of the person. What is the lifestyle of the person like that might potentially use this app? The second way is looking at it from more of this engineering and quality team perspective. And obviously, this is one of my favorites. And this is saying that every single customer expects that application to work exactly for them, no matter what the device they're on or what operating system they're on or what country they're in. And as you think about that, that then helps you play with, and when you're testing things, you might go, okay, I'm an absolute Chrome fanatic, but there are people in the world who use Safari, who use Opera, who use Firefox. Why don't I try testing on some of those environments? Because different situations might occur. And that helps you just think more broadly than the environment that you're in, because the persona of your customers expect it to work for them, no matter what device or location. And so really, the core message there is think like your customer. The more that you can think like your customer, the more likely you are to find some really great issues that will help you win this competition. And in your day-to-day roles, will help you better find things that are going to be more external focused and more customer focused when you are doing your testing. So that was that first idea, how to become a better tester. And it's really having that customer focus. The second idea is how do you position yourself to be promoted faster? Now, obviously, this isn't related to this competition, but I thought to myself, what does everybody want to do in life? We all want to grow in our positions in some way, and you wouldn't be inside this community if you didn't want to grow in your own personal profession. So we're going to talk about how can you get promoted faster? And really, it comes down to this beautiful word of influence. Oftentimes when I talk to people about influence or about being able to persuade people in and around their company, they say to me, they're like, Ron, I'm not really like a salesperson. That's kind of what the salespeople do. That's not really my thing. And there's this guy called Daniel Pink, and he said, in your day, 40% of your day and your life is spent selling to people, whether you even like it or not. And some of you may go, really? That's not true. And now just have a think. If you have a child in your life, a spouse in your life, you will know that you have to persuade them, or even parents, you have to persuade these people of everything at some point in your day. And so becoming better at this ability to influence the people around us isn't just a work skill, it's a life skill, because it allows us to help other people understand why our ideas are brilliant. And so there's a few quick ways that I want you to look at this as we go. The first is, think about how you can build empathy with people around you. The more that you can understand about that other person and have them understand more about your world, the better you will be at keeping people aligned and having a better perspective. There is a story where a manager decided that he saw two of his teams weren't working very well together. So he had just finished watching this film called Freaky Friday, where the mother and daughter morph and switch places. So he decided to get the two heads of department to switch places with each other. And what he found is that at first they were like, that's a crazy idea. But then being in the other person's shoes made them truly appreciate so much about how that other person worked. And he said for the rest of the company's existence, those two departments were the closest bonded because they appreciated each other's work. And so as you think about that in your own roles, how can you build empathy and understanding with other departments or other people in other departments? How can you show them a bit more about your world so they can understand where you're coming from when it comes to quality? And then know and understand the motivations and fears of the people that you actually want to influence. Because oftentimes when we tell people stuff, we want to tell them stuff because we're super interested in it. But the truth is, we need to understand what they care about, and we need to talk about our example in their world in the way that they care. And then another thing you might do is you might look to cultivate champions inside your company. And the more champions that you can cultivate internally, in terms of just speaking with other people in other departments, helping them understand why what you're doing is important, is really key. And so I understand that for some people, this is a completely new area and they don't spend too much time thinking about it. So I want to give you these 4 books to think about. The Psychology of Influencer Persuasion is one of the foundational books on persuading, and it looks at how can you use different things in and around your life to make people understand why the work that you are doing or the issue that you want fixed is so important. The second is to sell as human. For all those that feel completely uncomfortable with this idea of selling, like, that's what those people do. I don't do that, or I don't feel comfortable. Just pick up a book like this, just to understand we all naturally sell in just the way that we communicate. Even just our excitement can help sell something to somebody. And then my favorite is this. I just love the title of this book. I actually don't think it's a great book inside, but whoever tells the best story wins. How many of us have been in meetings where the person you're listening to someone talk and you're thinking this person's chatting absolute crap, right? But everyone else is agreeing. They're like, great idea. And really, all it comes down to is the fact that that person has told a better story. So think about how we package information back. Instead of just going to our developers and saying, hey, this is broke, you should fix it. How do we package that in a nicer story that's most likely to get the fix? And so think about different ways of persuading. And so I want to tell you this one trick that I got told about telling stories that has been really insightful for me. And someone said to me that when you tell someone something that you're interested in or excited about, you tell it to them from the perspective of the ending. So you basically go, I think this thing is really cool and you should really like it as well. But that person has no context and they just don't really care enough. And you're like, why don't they care? And it's because they don't understand why they should care. So another way to tell stories, whether it's about the issues we find or the changes we want to make inside a company, is to think about this thing called an epiphany bridge. And the epiphany bridge basically says that there was a point in time where you yourself didn't care or didn't understand why something was important. So instead of starting by saying, this thing is really important, tell someone, you know what? There was a point in time where I didn't even get it. And then take them on the journey of how you got to better understand why it was important. Take them on your own epiphany. And just that process of taking them on the journey actually means they start to process it and they get closer to understanding why it's important. So think about epiphany bridge stories in how you communicate things internally, and that will help you as you move forward. Now, I know we don't have a lot of time here, but Jonathan did say I could go a little bit over time to share this quick story with you of how I have used epiphany bridges when communicating and a lot of other people have. So I just want to share this with you real quick. And it's really on this question of, can you automate everything? There is not a person in this room that has not posed or been asked this question by some manager that said, why do I even need a manual person here? Because I could just automate everything. Now, this is the story that you tell them, right? And this was a story that was told to me by a good friend of mine called Dan Ashby, who used to be the head of testing at eBay. And I remember I was actually flying to go to an event called a Testathon, which is very similar to this Bug Bash. And I was boarding the plane at Heathrow, and I just read this article by Dan Ashby called Testing in DevOps. And I texted a friend of mine called Vernon and said, hey, do you know who this guy Dan Ashby is? And he said, yeah, I'm actually talking in front of him right now. And I was like, what? I said, do you mind making an intro to this guy? Because I'm fascinated with the way that he looks at stuff. And he made the intro, and a week later I was on the phone with Dan, and he loved drawing things. So he started drawing things onto a virtual whiteboard for me. And I'm going to share the model. So I was trying to understand, can you automate everything? And he said, Ronald, let me just show you this. When we're doing testing, we're effectively trying to uncover information in some way. Or we're trying to understand what's going on around us. And there are different ways of getting that information. Now, one way that we can do it is we can investigate stuff. And this is when we are looking to uncover pieces of information that we don't really know what's going on. So we have to kind of look and see, is there a problem here? Is there a problem there, etc. And when we investigate stuff, it gives us new sets of information. And with that information, it gives us new ideas of how we might investigate and test. And so this ability to investigate is a key component of how we work. Another way that we might actually look at testing is we might be verifying what's actually going on. And when we're verifying, the information that we already have, which might be like, I'm trying to work out how do we log in, that has certain expectations. So we can say you should be able to log in if you put in the correct username and password. Now, this usually gives us pass-fail sort of information when we do it. And it provides more information for how we can work. But really, the only things that you can automate are things that you are verifying. You can't automate things that you are trying to investigate. And so that was like my first aha, like, you know what? That makes complete sense. Now I get what can and can't be automated. So he posed a second question to me. And he said, the real question you should be asking is, should you even automate the things that you could automate? And so he then kept on going in this diagram and he said, let's look at this whole idea of verifying. There are two things that you can, there's two ways to verify. One way is you can verify using a human, and another way is you can verify using a machine, which is the automation tools that we all look at. And you have to make a decision over which one makes the most sense for you at that particular point in time. And IBM did this study where they actually looked at how do you know whether you should automate something or not. And it really came down to three things. It came down to the length of time it's going to take to run that automation. If it be used again and again and again, then it's super useful to automate it. If the application is changing so much that the automation will continually break, you might want to look at doing that testing in a different way. How easy is it to actually drive that automation? For all those that do automation, you understand it's not always as easy to actually automate the thing you want to automate. So that gives us perspective of should we be using a human or a machine? And then lastly, what is the comparative total cost? Sometimes our companies may only look at the cost of a person's salary. They might not look at the fact that you also have to maintain this thing that you've built like any other piece of software. And that has its own costs associated to it. But by trying to take a sense of these three components, you get an idea of whether the answer is should you automate or not. But really, for those that have been in the game long enough, you really understand that it's whether you'd actually be doing both, so it doesn't matter. But the thing is, this whole story that I just told you was my own epiphany as to whether I can automate and whether I should automate. So now, whenever people have this conversation with me, I don't just tell them my views that they should do both. I tell them the epiphany story that I just showed you as to why that conclusion comes to that point. And by the time I take them through my epiphany, they're actually more on my side for what I wanted to talk about than having a big debate for no reason. And so this idea of us looking at how we influence and communicate inside our company is super important, because the foundation of everything is that the people who get promoted in companies that I have seen are not the people who one day hope that they will do something that makes them look like a leader. It's the people who are already doing that right now. Like if you had the choice to choose between two people, are you going to choose the person who has shown no signs of leading, or the person who has been doing it and influencing and knows everyone and is always trying to make change happen? It's kind of a no-brainer which one you think you're going to choose. And so that's why you should always be thinking about right now, whether you're a leader or not, how can you start to look at creating more influence inside your role? And so I want to give you some quick takeaways from the talk. The first one is be customer-centric in your view of quality. And particularly today, as you're looking to win some prizes, think about the customer. The second is make sure you're growing your level of influence in your day-to-day when you go back into the office tomorrow. Because our ability to influence isn't just about work. If we learn these skills, it will help us in all parts of life. And then lastly, make sure you're telling epiphany bridge stories, because the more epiphany bridge stories you tell, the easier it will be for people to understand that change.